You are listening to your new Puppies podcast, starting you and your dog off on the right paw. Here's your host, Debbie Salento.
Hello and welcome to episode 111 of your new Puppies podcast. I'm Debbie, and today I want to talk about some challenges that small dog parents may encounter. So I myself am not a small dog person. I've never had a small dog. I've always gravitated towards larger dogs. But I have been training for 14 years, especially specializing with puppies. I have a lot of experience and seen different things time and time again with my clients. So this one is for you. So you know I have not forgotten about you. So first, let's talk about some of the advantages, right? The good stuff. Like they eat a whole lot less, making it less expensive to feed them. All of their supplies are smaller. And so in general, it's less expensive to have a smaller dog. They're probably not going to tear through toys as quickly, or even their bones and their chews. Now, I am sure there are some heavy chewers out there. Somebody has a small dog that has a floor full of stuffing that's like, I beg to differ. But in general, because their jaws just aren't that strong, they don't destroy things as much. They are very portable, which can be a disadvantage, and we will talk about that. But they can go anywhere with you. If you're having trouble, if they're barking at somebody, if there's danger in the area, you can scoop them right up, right? During potty training, that's especially useful. In fact, I know a lot of clients who intentionally got smaller dogs because they travel and they can go on the plane with you. They can't reach the counters. Now, you might have some jumpers that, are almost like cats where they can get up on top of the refrigerator if they wanted to. But in general, you don't have to worry about the counter surfing and them stealing food off the table. Now, there's also one thing that is a myth where small dogs are good apartment dogs or they're low energy, because that is not true. It is actually better to have a Great Dane in an apartment because all they need is a walk around the block and then they're snoozing on your couch all day than, say, a terrier who has endless amounts of energy, who would do better in a larger house or a large yard where they can keep moving all day long. But if you're sure to get a smaller dog that is lower energy and doesn't need that much space to move around, having a small dog is great if you have a small living situation. Now, let's talk about some of the struggles that you may have, because it's always nice to know that it's not just you, right? That this is a struggle that small owners go through and you're not just doing something wrong. The very first thing that we tend to run into is just the gear, specifically harnesses, collars, leashes, especially if you have a small dog and they are a puppy, because they are tiny. And they just don't make harnesses for dogs that small. I have a lot of clients who want to harness train their dogs early or their puppies early, and you just can't find the right gear for it. I have had clients, use cat gear. Even they sell rabbit harnesses, which could be small enough for your dog. I've also had clients use their own sewing talent and adjust it for their dog. It can also be hard to find sweaters or jackets for small dogs, or, small dogs as puppies specifically. And that also brings me to another struggle, which is temperature sensitivity and weather sensitivity, which kind of are interrelated. But in general, puppies can't regulate their own body temperature like adult dogs do. And small dogs also have a harder time with mostly keeping themselves warm. A lot of smaller dogs, like if you think Chihuahuas, are actually made for the heat. And for this reason, they also tend to be very precipitation sensitive. They don't like the rain. Maybe they don't like the snow. Maybe if you live in an area where the snow can actually be taller than your dog, that can make walks and bathroom breaks difficult. So this one can be a real challenge, especially during potty training. But if they always have like an adverse reaction to bad weather, it can be a struggle every season. So what I've had clients do, or a lot of times it's the clients got creative, is, you can put a mat down on the ground right outside your back door. And especially if it's only like a little bit of snow or a little bit of rain, then you can pull the mat up and there's some relatively dry grass underneath. This is also when maybe having a permanent fixture or something that, or an umbrella handy where you could put it up and protect a little area of ground for your dog. Now, this is also where a lot of clients will ask, what about my porch? My porch is covered, or they'd rather go there than on the grass. I say use that with caution, because even if you put one of those little grass pads out there, they may always see it as a place to go potty, even once you remove the pad. That's the risk when you use that method. But if it's like, I don't mind always having a grass pad there, go for it. Now, talking about potty training is also another thing that is harder for smaller dogs, simply because their bladders are tiny and they have to go out a whole lot more. There's also a tendency to use potty pads more. Now, if you're going to use potty pads permanently, that's fine. Pad train your dog. But if you listen to me, if you want your dog to go to potty outside exclusively, then we shouldn't be using potty pads at all. But when you have a small dog, it's easier to let that go because it's a small mess. So, a larger dog makes a larger mess. So you're more apt to want to get that out of your house as soon as possible. So with smaller dogs, you might procrastinate more, or you might fudge the rules and you're like, I know Debbie said this, but we're just going to use a pad for now because you have to take them out so often. And it's understandable, but that is part of the struggle having a small dog. And you'll hear me say this again later, but I recommend treating it as if it was a big mess, treating it as if it was a big dog, and using that same technique and that same schedule, because at the end of the day, they are going to learn the same about going outside. The other thing that could be a special consideration is just food and feeding. Not only are tiny dogs, I know that there's a blood sugar concern and they have to eat. They can't go long times without eating, especially as puppies. This is something, if you're not sure about, definitely talk to your vet about. But my experience is when I go to a house and there's this tiny little dog that I have to train, I can go to a house with a 50-pound dog and feed them 50 treats, and I've pretty much had no effect on their nutrition. I can't do that with a small dog. I have to be very careful about the size treat and how many times I give it to them, because I can throw off their nutrition very quickly. And even the techniques I leave for their humans, we have to make sure that we're balancing their food and their treats. A non-food motivated dog, so a small dog that also doesn't care about food, is one of my hardest clients. But if we can use their regular kibble or food that they eat as training treats, that makes things a whole lot easier. Now, speaking of training, this is the biggest trap that I see. Small dogs tend to be the most misbehaved dogs because they're small and they can get away with it. And it's not as intrusive. So we kind of let it go and we don't train it until it becomes a huge problem. And then it's harder to train. It's never impossible to train your dog. It's never too late. I need to emphasize that. But the longer it's been going on, if they're 5 years old and they've had this habit since they were a puppy, that's going to be a lot harder than if they're 2 years old, which will still be harder than if they're 6 months old. But, jumping on guests, barking at the UPS man, pulling on the leash, all of these things, they're easy to let go because they're small dogs and they're not pulling your arm out of the socket and they're not mauling your guests. They're just kind of hitting their knees. And this goes back to what I was saying before, that their portability can be an advantage, but it can also be a disadvantage. When they are reactive on a leash and they're barking and barking and barking at that dog that's coming at them, it's really easy just to scoop them up. I see it all the time because I live right next to apartments that allow dogs. So I have a lot of foot traffic in front of my house. I have a lot of dogs in front of my house. I also have a dog that likes to howl at everybody. And so there are some small dogs that as soon as they get to our yard, they pick the dog up and they just walk by our yard. Which, you know what? That's not the end of the world. If that's how you handle it, that is fine. But if it starts to leak into other places, then it can start to be a problem. Or if you're the only person your dog lets pick up, they don't let strangers pick them up, and you need to hire a dog walker, the dog walker's not going to be able to do that. So when I work with a client and they're like, well, what should we work on? I always think about, I'm like, what if this was a 50-pound dog? What if this was an 80-pound dog? What would be appropriate? What wouldn't be? And I start there a lot, because even though they're jumping on guests and it's not a big deal, maybe it is a big deal when you come in with your fancy dress on, or somebody's rented suit that's now ripped, or a guest who's allergic to dogs. And the last thing I wanted to mention that I see a lot is, because our small dogs can go with us everywhere, I see a lot more separation anxiety in the smaller dogs. Now, a lot of small dogs are also bred to be companion dogs. Like, that is why they're small. And any dog that is bred to be a companion dog is predisposed to separation anxiety. And even if they do develop separation anxiety, like I just talked about, sometimes we don't recognize it right away, right? You have a big dog that has separation anxiety and they destroyed their crate or destroyed your house while you were gone. You're like, something's wrong. Maybe those same effects aren't there. Maybe we have like a puddle on the floor. Maybe we have some panting. You know, if we didn't hear them crying, it's easier to miss it. And then, because we take them everywhere, maybe they're not used to being alone. Maybe we've never trained them how to be alone. So the good news, as I mentioned before, that small dogs learn in the same way big dogs do. Like, dogs all learn in the same way. So the same training techniques that I always talk about works on large and smaller dogs. Maybe there has to be an adjustment here or there, especially physically. For example, when I'm teaching leash training, I'll take a long wooden spoon and put a little peanut butter on the end, so I don't have to like constantly like lean all the way down to drip feed the dog. But the whole, rewarding good behavior, understanding what your dog's seeing so you can address underlying problems, all of that is the same. So hopefully by now, those of you with small dogs feel a little bit more seen, and those of you thinking about getting a small dog, especially a puppy, are now prepared. And that is all I have for you today. If you would like to dive deeper into training your new puppy and even talk to me one-on-one about trying to solve some of these small dog issues, you can check out my program, Your Perfect Puppy, which includes Playtime Paws Academy, which includes direct access to me, where every week I work one-on-one with my students to help solve the issues that are specifically theirs. You can check that out at playtimepaws.com/puppy. Otherwise, if you are enjoying this podcast, you can rate and review it, and that helps other dog owners find the podcast. Until next time, I thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.